Welcome to this JavaScript functions tutorial. In this tutorial, you're gonna be learning fun things about JavaScript functions and methods. Yes, we are gonna learn about the tips and tricks on how to make your JavaScript code dynamically. So in front of me, I have Visual Studio Code opened and I have a directory called JavaScript, which I've created on my desktop. In this directory, I'm gonna create an index.html file. Index.html. So I'm using an add-on called Emmet, which allows me to access the HTML elements by merely doing an indication of which element I want to access. For me to access the skeleton for HTML, I'm going to use this exclamation mark. Immediately, it shows me, Visual Studio Code shows me Emmet abbreviation. I'm going to click enter. When I click enter, I already have the HTML skeleton. So in this HTML skeleton, I'm gonna include my JavaScript file. JavaScript file I'm gonna create called function.js, right? So this function.js file, it's a JavaScript file because of this .js extension, as like the HTML file is an HTML file because of this .html extension. So if I write anything within this JavaScript code, it won't do anything because we need browser to be able to display whatever we write in this code on the browser. So we're gonna access that file through the index.html file by merely doing script. And then I'm gonna link it saying source src, which is equivalent to source. Then this is the directory that Visual Studio Code recognizes that I'm working in. Then it looks for the files. Then I'm gonna click this function.js. Now it has included. I included underneath my header because of some technical reasons. When working with JavaScript, if you put it on the header file, it will look for the elements which has not been loaded by the page first and so forth. It might make your code buggy. So it's a standard that you put your JavaScript file on the underneath the content that you're gonna write that your page has to load. Then for me to display the browser, I'm gonna use the live server plugin, which it's gonna watch the changes in my files. Then you see it runs on port 5500. Anything when I do the changes here and save the file, which I activated the autosave for Visual Studio Code, is gonna save automatically. So every time when it saves, it's gonna look at for the changes and renders them on the browser. To illustrate what I'm talking about, I'm gonna change this title document to JavaScript. I didn't do any Control S for save. I didn't go and say file save because of the autosave functionality with Visual Studio Code. And I'm gonna go to the browser. The title of the HTML page has been changed to JavaScript. This is what this plugin is gonna do. I'd advise that you have this plugin for productivity purposes. Then you have your function.js file. Then JavaScript functions they are predefined functions and they are user-defined functions. For most of the programming language, that's the case. So what I'm gonna do is to talk about the 3 predefined functions that we are going to be using in this tutorial. It might happen that I'm gonna choose one or use all 3 of them or 2. It depends, but I think it's essential for me to talk about these functions. Then the first function that we have the document dot write function, which Visual Studio Code interpreted as write one or more HTML expressions to a document in the specified window, right? What it means is that if I put a string here and say hello document, I'm gonna see it on my browser. Oh, not help document, hello document. Then I'm going to my browser. I see it says hello document. Then I'm gonna comment this out using the single line comments. Then another method, we have function. Forgive me about that. We have the console dot log, which is useful for debugging purposes, because when you write your code, you don't wanna write a buggy code. You wanna write clean codes which are functioning as intended to. So console.log, I'm gonna print out hello console, which is gonna be on the browser console. I'm using Firefox as my browser. This I'm gonna press F12 to display the console. Then this is it, console. It says hello console, right? Then another function which we have the alert function, which is alert. Then I'm gonna say hello alert. Okay, then I'm going to my file. It's like this. It displays nothing because the moment I said alert and didn't put anything, it refreshed. The live server plugin just refreshed. So I'm gonna say okay and refresh again to be able to see something. It says hello alert. Okay, so now that you know about these predefined functions, we can use them to output something on the browser. Excuse me about that. So functions that are user defined, you have to have a function ignoring the existence of a script. You're gonna have like this function, then you call it the function name. I'm gonna give it a function name called my function using camel case. Then I'm gonna have parameters, which is para1, then I'm gonna have para2, I'm gonna have para3. So you can have as much as parameters as you like. You can have a function as a parameter also. Then I want this function to be able to return the product of my parameters, para1 multiplied by para2 multiplied by para3, right? Then for me to call, I have declared the function and put on all the properties of the function. For me to call this function, to be able to do something with it, I have to call it like this, my function. Then inside the parentheses is where it says it has to be para1, any, para2, any. This any means any data type. But because I want it to be a multiplication, Visual Studio Code, see that it has to be a number. So my parameters, I'm gonna use 3 and 3, which is gonna return 3 multiplied by 3 and multiplied by 3. By merely doing this, I'm going to the browser and see my console doesn't put anything, my alert doesn't do anything, my document.write doesn't do anything, because we didn't use any of that to display something on the browser. Now I'm gonna do this document dot write. I want it to display this function call, which is equivalent to this. So I'm gonna take this and cut it and paste it inside of my document.write as a parameter, or you can say an argument, depends on what you say. Then it displays 27, which is the property, the product of the 3 parameters, right? Then I'm gonna comment this out. Now you have in JavaScript, you can use functions for various things. For instance, you can use object with functions, which is my favorite part of dealing with functions in JavaScript. What I mean is that I'm gonna use the var keyword for declaring variables. Then I'm gonna give this variable a name called my fruit. Then I'm gonna assign it to an object. Yes, by using these curly braces, I'm saying this is no longer a variable, but it's an object. So whatever I'm putting here is gonna be properties or methods, right? For now, I'm gonna put the properties of the fruit. The fruit, I'm gonna put the property type of apple. Apple is my fruit. Then I'm gonna put in the property called color. Color, red apples. Then I'm gonna put in the size. Then the size, I'm gonna say it's small. Ignoring all the methods, all of the operations of a function, when you're dealing with objects, whenever you want to access any property in the object, you use the dot method. I'm gonna call it a method. I don't know what it's called, but you're gonna use the dot method. So what I'm talking about is that if I do the document.write function to be able to print something on the browser, for me to access the properties of the fruit object, I'm gonna say my fruit, then I say dot. Immediately Visual Studio Code realizes that the properties of my fruit object is color, size, and type. So what I'm gonna do is access the color, document.write color. So whatever is supposed to be printed on the browser, it's the color of the object type of fruit, so which is red. I'm gonna do this, then there it is, red. If I wanna access the size, I'm gonna say color, then say size. It has to output small. So this is what is happening. So using objects and functions, we're gonna do it like this. I'm gonna have another function and I call it object. I'm gonna call it object func, then use the parentheses, then the curly braces. Then this function, I want it to have the parameter of any object that I might have in my code. So I'm gonna use object. You can put any name that you want as a parameter. So I'm gonna use object for the purposes of this example. Then I want this code to be able to return the object which is gonna be passed in as an argument. Then access what? The type. Or you can do the color, or you can do the size, right? Then I'm gonna do the semicolon to show that it's the end of the statement. So for me to be able to use this function, I told you I have to call this function object function and so forth. Then I'm gonna say object function, then putting the object is my fruit object, target my fruit. But this, what I've done here, is equivalent to what we did on the previous function, which we just copied. We just cut and pasted it on the document.write function, which is the same thing I'm gonna do even with this one. I'm gonna cut it from here and I'm gonna come and paste it on the document.write object fruit. So it's gonna take this fruit object and say my fruit dot type, which is equivalent to what we did to access the properties of the object. Then I'm gonna go here, it says what type, access the type and said April. I'm gonna change this and access the size, which is equivalent to small. So this is how you can work with objects and functions. Another thing you can do with objects and functions, you can have functions within an object which we call them methods. What I mean by that, I'm gonna take out these properties and have methods such as, okay, I'm gonna call this method 1, right? Then I want this method to return a string 1, right? Then I'm gonna also have a method called 2. I want it to return a string called 2. Right, so this is what is happening here. So for me to be able to access the methods, okay, let me use the console.log so that I can be able to explain this better. You have your console.log function, right? For you to access this method, you're gonna use my fruit object and do the dot thingy. Then Visual Studio Code shows you the methods that you have inside the fruit object, which is 2 and 1. I'm gonna access the 2 method and I'm gonna use the parenthesis. Then I'm gonna go to my browser, console.log. Here, this is it. It has output 2, right? So if you can see this, it says in the document.write it says undefined. The reason it says this is because here we were doing the my fruit object, which has an property of the fruit, a size and what, and we took all of these things out. So this is an error which is shown in the document so that you can be able to debug and know what is happening, what's wrong and stuff. I'm gonna comment this out, and yeah, the console.log out. So this is it. This is how you can work with functions and object also. So another thing you can do with functions you have to know the function scope, right? In JavaScript you have 2 scopes: global scope for variables and for functions. As far as I know, we have global scope and we also have local scope. A global scope is any variable or function that can be accessed in every place on your program. Then the local scope, you can only access it, the variable or the function inside that function in which it was declared on. Meaning that if you want to access the variable defined as a local scope or a function defined as a local scope, you have to convert it into a global scope, right? We're gonna talk about that in a moment. So let me just take this out. I don't know why I typed this. Okay, we're gonna have a variable. I'm gonna call this variable p and assign it to a value of 2, right? This, it's a global scope because it's a variable declared outside the function, right? Then I'm gonna have a function, user-defined function. I'm gonna call it func name. Then this, inside the func name, I'm gonna declare another variable with the same name as the one we declared above, which is variable p. I'm gonna declare it as variable p and I'm gonna assign it to a value of let me say 6, right? And then for me to access this variable is accessed within this function. So for me to access this variable, what I must do is let me have this function. Let me call this function name okay, declare. Then this function declare, I want it to console.log p so that I can find what's the value of p. Will it take the value of the global scope or will it take the value of the local scope? This is what I want to see. Then, because this function is a global function and this function is a local function, for me to call this function, I have to call it within this function. So meaning that if I'm gonna say outside this function, I'm gonna say declare, nothing is gonna work. Let me do this document dot write. Let me do this, say declare. Nothing is working, nothing is happening. It says console.log on my console. It says reference declare is not defined. However, if I do the returning of the declare here, the function called declare, inside this function, which is global scope, then I call the function which I have named it func name, then see what is being, it outputs these console.log here, which is the value of 6. It takes the variable which has been declared in the local scope. It can be accessed by this function within it. So if I'm gonna say var, statement for declaring a variable, var, then I say var did, I'm gonna call it var did, then I say it's assigned to a function. This is it. So this function is different than this function because there is no function name given here. If this function is not been given a name here, it can be accessed by this name, as if we were saying the name of this function is var_title. So for us to be able to access this function here, which I want it also to console.log the value of p, for me to call this function, I have to use var_title like this, and you're gonna see the magic happening. It also takes 6. It's var_title. So I'm gonna have another function which now I'm gonna call, I'm gonna tell it to access the global variable. Okay, so I'm gonna call it var and call it global access. Then I'm gonna assign it and say this is a new function, right? Then this new function, I want it to console.log the variable called, geez, what has happened? Oh, sorry about that, guys. I want it to be able to access the console.log variable p. Then I'm gonna show us an end of the statement there, end of statement there. Then for me to access this new function, which does not have a function name, which is gonna automatically, the function name is gonna be globe access, I'm gonna use the globe access like this. So the answer I'm expecting on the console.log is 2, right? Then I go to my browser and see the console.log has taken out 2. This was to tell this function that it should have the global access, like as if it's a function that has been declared globally so that it can have a global access. So you know about scoping functions. you also use scope for variables. Now, what we are going to do is that we're going to discuss how do you check whether a function is defined in JavaScript. Do you have a function called that? So what's going to happen is that you use the if keyword. Let me comment this out. You use the if keyword to see whether a function has been defined. So I'm going to say if parenthesis, I'm going to say function inside here. Then I'm going to use this equal to, then type of window dot function name. Which function name I'm going to choose? Let me choose the function which I've already defined, which is the func. Let me go to the one which has a product. My function. Let me choose this one, func name, because it's nice to work with it. My func. Let me see what's the name of it again. Jeez, sorry about that. My func, it's func name, not my func name. Jeez. Func name, like this. Then if this function, if this returns true, I want it to call this function, which is func name, right? To use the function func name, or I'm gonna use the document dot write sorry about that. Document dot write func name. Someone is becoming tired. Okay, document on func name. Else, if the function does not exist, I want the browser to document dot write this string saying function exists not. Okay. You see here, the document.write func name has been commented out, which means in absence of this code, nothing has to be displayed in the browser. Okay, let me see. Gonna refresh. I don't get anything for document.write. What might be the challenge here? Excuse me, I was a little bit confused by this undefined here. I forgot that I didn't use. Oh, yeah, it's because I used the document dot. What, undefined document? Oh, jeez, document dot write. Oh, okay. Let me do this. Call the func name, which is gonna console.log. Which is gonna console.log, whatever. Cause remember, in our functions definition, all of the methods which we are calling here it's console.log, not document.write. So me using document.write, it was giving me like some sort of collisions and stuff. For you to be able to see that this function name is working, I'm gonna use it document.write. It won't work also. Okay, so we have this function name exists, right? If it doesn't exist, I want to have the document.write function name doesn't exist. Let me change a little bit of this, say func now, which I know it doesn't exist. And let me check. It says function exists not. Okay, you saw that it displays document.write function exists not because this function does not exist. This is how you should check whether a function exists or not. So what we are going to be looking at as our last discussion for this tutorial, it's events based functions. So I'm gonna have a dummy HTML form here. This form, I won't have it to submit data to something else and stuff. So this form, I want to create a button, say input, the input type, I want to have it as a button. Then I want to have it on this event on click. You're going to learn more about JavaScript events. On click, I want it to call a method, a function, which I don't have it already, which is it says hello world. This is the function that I want it to call. Remember, function call, this is how we do it, right? Then I'm gonna have this button to have a value of say hello, right? Okay. So go to my browser, see my HTML has a button called say hello. Then what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go to my functions JavaScript file, and this is where I'm gonna have the function. I'm gonna call it event function. Okay, this event function, it's a function. No, jeez, someone is tired, really tired. Function. Then I have the hello world function. What do I want this hello world function to be able to do? I want it to alert. Remember that function we discussed, predefined JavaScript function alert. What must it alert? Hello world. When will this hello world be alerted on the browser? On click of the button, right? Then go to the browser, click the button, got the alert, hello world. This is how you have event-based functions. Then if you want to have event-based functions based on the parameters that the user supplies, this will feel like a repetition, but I think it's essential for us to discuss this before I do away with this tutorial. You have a function the function is called param, because I'm gonna take params. I'm gonna put in the name and the age of that person. Then what do I want the function to do on a certain event? I want it to do document dot write. Okay, what do I want it to write? The name that has been passed in as a parameter, and also concatenate. This is concatenation, guys. If I use this plus, is to be able to make this one string. Whatever I'm gonna put in here is gonna output as one string. So name is concatenate age years old, right? Then I'm gonna have it like this. Okay, go to my index.html form. I'm gonna copy this input and paste it here. Then the name of my function, let me go back and refer, it's param, right? So I'm gonna have param, right? Then my first argument will be a string. My first argument will be a string. which is equivalent to, oh jeez, use one quotation marks. That one, not the double quote, just use single quote. Yes. The name, I'm gonna say this is Zelda. Then Zelda is 65. Okay. The value, I'm gonna change it to param. You can, just for me to see which button is that. Param. Upon click event, I want it to be able to output our string here, which we are saying document.write name and is years old. So this is what I have. Param, Zelda is 65 years old. So that's it, guys, with the tutorial. If you stick to this YouTube channel, you like the video, please press that like button and subscribe for future videos. I'm planning to do more of the videos like these ones where we dwell into the depth of the functionalities that we have. If you want me to cover something in respect of the JavaScript functions that we didn't cover in this tutorial, please use the comment section to inform me. That's it, folks. That's the end of this JavaScript functions tutorial. I enjoyed it. I hope you did also. Cheers.